hope you're doing well, and I'm glad you're tuning in with me today on today's episode of what's happening in the crypto space, especially around Ethereum, because that's what's on fire at the moment. I'll start with a very interesting article by Adam Cochran. He posted a lot of tweets talking about the 7 reasons that Ethereum 2.0 will cause the next economic shift. A very bullish article, and I'll pick out some details that I think make it super interesting. Afterwards, I want to talk to you about Vitalik Buterin's perspective on the ETH 2.0 delay. Then I want to share with you a new patent by Visa, which is super interesting. I'll show you some insight of a very interesting project that a man did where he tokenized himself on the Ethereum blockchain. And last but not least, I want to share with you a visual coding editor that will let you play around with different Ethereum programming concepts. You can build apps and stuff like that in the browser. I think it's an incredibly interesting concept that you can play around with, so stay tuned for that at the end of the video. My name's Kierin. I create DeFi and crypto videos to make sure that you are ready for the next bull run. If you're interested in knowing what happens in the crypto space with Ethereum and many different other projects, then make sure to join me on the journey and hit the subscribe button. So let's get started with Adam Cochran's tweets talking about the economic shift induced by Ethereum 2.0. So 7 reasons by Adam Cochran. The first one is talking about rent seekers. So institutional investors want 3 to 5% return on investment. So what they're going to be probably doing as soon as staking is possible with Ethereum Serenity upgrade is they're going to be buying a lot of Ethereum, staking it, and making sure that the return on investment is stable, because very often big investment institutions, they want stable return on investment. They don't want high volatility, so they'll make sure that they put enough in to bring the price down, to bring the return on investment down of the staking from maybe 10% to around 3 or 5%. And in order to do that, they have to buy a lot of Ethereum. And I think to bring the return on investment, to bring the staking price down to the areas of 3 to 5%, these institutions will have to buy 10 to 30 million ETH in order to achieve that. What that means is it will create a supply shock. Supply shock means that there's less supply, and yeah, we've been experiencing a massive supply shock now during this pandemic with many supply chains not being able to deliver products to companies. What that means then is that these products or these raw goods increase in price because there's not a lot, but the demand is the same or even higher. Yeah, the supply shock is of course going to increase the price of ETH because less supply with the same amount of demand. Probably what is also going to happen, and he talks a little bit about that, is after the institutional investors have already invested in the first round, they'll come again because they realize that the initial investment increased in price, maybe 2x or 4x, and they want to bring the portion of their total investment down to relative levels, maybe a few percent. And now because of the price increase, the second reason is FOMO by retail investors. Retail investors will first of all see these amazing staking rewards. Second of all, they will see the price of ETH and many different other cryptocurrencies constantly increasing. And yeah, retail investors are notorious for jumping onto the rocket after it has already left the landing pad. They'll just hammer the market with market buys because they just want to get on board and they don't want to be left out because they've got this very strong sense of fear of missing out. So retail investors FOMOing into the market will cause a massive rally like we've seen in 2017. It's possible it's much higher, because then we come to the next part, and that is cash on ramp. During the 2017 bull market, there were not that many options to bring a fiat currency into the cryptocurrency space. I remember clearly Binance, Coinbase, and many other platforms were having problems. I don't even think Binance had the option to buy cryptocurrencies with cash during the 2017 bull run, but I do know that they had problems registering new users. I think there was a limit of a certain amount of users that were allowed to go onto the platform and sign up. And Coinbase was also having problems. I mean, Coinbase still has problems when the price of Bitcoin plummets or rises rapidly. Coinbase is having trouble maintaining a stable platform. it's always got its problems when the market is very volatile. Hopefully they manage to iron out these problems for the next bull run. But still, even with these problems, they've got a lot more users on their platform that are approved. I think 5 million were in 2017, and now there's already 30 million plus approved users on Coinbase. And there are many other centralized exchanges which allow on-ramp, which allow cash on-ramps fiat to crypto. So that means many different retail investors will be, so many retail investors have the possibility to enter the market at, so many retail investors have the possibility to enter the market. So the last piece of the puzzle to entail, so the last piece of the puzzle to induce a massive rally is probably going to be the news outlets. The news outlets which start talking about different cryptocurrency prices reaching all-time highs, and that will induce this fear of that will induce the fear of missing out for many retail investors, and they'll just jump and try and still catch this departing rocket. Then afterwards, now we've already looked at the crazy supply shock which will happen, especially with ETH, due to many institutional investors wanting to stake, and that means a large portion of the available ETH is going to be locked away. Less ETH remaining to buy. But the first supply shock we looked at, it was with constant demand. Now with a lot more institutional investors wanting to enter the market, and also the retail FOMOing into the market. Yeah, so piling on top of the supply shock, you're going to have a demand shock. So less supply but increased demand, which will expedite the price growth of ETH. And yeah, probably it will create something that looks like a bubble, something that looks like the market rally that we saw in January 2018 when talking about ETH price. All right, so with that said, afterwards is the actual demand that also comes into play. Institutions that are actually using Ethereum for their smart contract, or decentralized applications using Ethereum, using gas to be able to lock documents or validate stuff on the Ethereum blockchain. Well, their demand will also lead to an increased demand for ETH to be able to continue with their operations. And I think another good point is the more decentralized applications are being built on top of the Ethereum blockchain, the Metcalfe law becomes a very important aspect and proponent of growth, because the Metcalfe law says, the definition of the Metcalfe law is the value of a network is proportional to the amount of users to the power of 2. So the more decentralized applications are on the network for people to use, well, that amount to the power of 2 is then the value of the network. And with more and more decentralized applications being built on the network, the value is just constantly increasing. That means more transactions, that means more ETH is being used. That's just exponential growth from actual demand. And yeah, the more value the network, the more people enter the network, and the growth just continues. Pick of Ethereum 2.0, but now Vitalik Buterin's opinions on it. And I think what's interesting is because many people are like very critical to the ETH 2.0 delays, the launch date being delayed, false promises, or that's their opinion. And what I think is very important to understand is that it's a very complicated piece of software. And they've also made it very hard for themselves with many different iterations, many improvements, and so on. Justin Drake also tweeted about that and said, we made ETH2 very hard for ourselves, many design iterations, many community clients versus just one, and many different protocols and improvement proposals to make Ethereum 2.0 definitely a lot better than Ethereum 1.0. And that's also one thing that Vitalik Buterin states. He doesn't regret the delay of Ethereum 1.0, but he does regret a lot of the mistakes and design flaws that Ethereum 1.0 has. So he prefers to make sure that everything is in place, everything is correct for Ethereum 2.0, not like just try and push the launch so that it's launched much earlier, but make sure that everything is working as it should before the beacon chain launches. So I quote Vitalik Buterin, "There's a big misunderstanding here. Ethereum did in fact launch in July 2015. My point was, I do not regret the delay. Rather, I regret the original protocol's technical deficiencies." So I think we're more or less in the same boat as we were then. They're making sure that everything is running smoothly before they launch the beacon chain. And it's true, some of the Ethereum 2.0 specs have not been finalized, so it would be much too soon to launch the beacon chain in July 30 as it was to be expected. But yeah, as long as they launch in 2020 or in my lifetime, I'm probably going to be happy with that. It doesn't really bother me that there's some delays. I prefer that the project is working as it should with no hiccups than a rushed project, and then after in a few months there's some technical difficulties that cause people to lose money. So all in all, I'm still very bullish on the project despite probably not being able to launch at the end of July. All right, but let's talk next. All right, with that said, let's talk about Visa. All right, now let's talk about Visa. And Visa has submitted a patent application for a system using Ethereum technology. So I'll quickly read what they are saying, or what the abstract is of their patent. So, techniques are disclosed which include receiving by a central entity computer a request for digital currency. The request includes a serial number and the denomination of a physical currency. The central entity computer generates the digital currency for the denomination and linked to the serial number. The generating includes recording the digital currency on a blockchain. The central entity computer transmits a notification of the generation of the digital currency, blah, 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 blah. All right, so this is very interesting. It's about a system, probably how the Visa system works. Enabling different companies to have like a link between each other, enabling one company to accept payments from customers and then send it maybe to another bank. So this is a graphic that they have provided to explain how the system works with you've got an ATM or bank and a customer, he's got his assets, private key and so on. And this all works with blockchain technology. I'm not going to explain it too in detail, but I think this is very interesting that they're using Ethereum technology to use this. So here in the back end, they've got blockchain to have the ledgers and transactions stored in there and validated transactions. And the reason why I believe it's Ethereum, and the reason why I believe they're using Ethereum technology for this is when you go down on one of their graphics, they use the Ethereum testnet for their technology. So with this picture, they shows that they're actually using the Ethereum technology for their minimum viable project for their system. So you've got ETH accounts. It's possible that they're using a testnet to prototype their system, but they are using Ethereum blockchain technology. Now the question is, are they going to move their system to Ethereum mainnet, or are they going to maybe use the Ethereum open source to create their own platform? Now that, of course, is a question that remains unanswered. But what I think is great is that they're actually using Ethereum blockchain technology, because that still opens the door to move to the Ethereum mainnet. And I think this is fantastic information, pretty bullish, because I mean, if you look at Visa, they've got an incredible amount of transactions and volume going through their networks. From the top of my head, if I'm not mistaken, I think in 2017 they had around 100 billion transactions, estimated at a valuation of 6.8 trillion US dollars. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's pretty accurate. And with that amount of transactions running on the Ethereum blockchain, that would mean having to use smart contracts and transactions on the Ethereum blockchain, which will induce a very high gas cost per year, which of course will have an effect on the ETH price, because big companies like Visa are probably going to accumulate a large amount of ETH in order to be able to hedge against price fluctuations. So let's continue. I'm still talking about Ethereum, about a guy who tokenized himself on the Ethereum blockchain. It's a very interesting concept. I haven't heard about this before. So he's done two things. He started, I think, a few weeks ago. He tokenized himself on the Ethereum blockchain. He sold some like tokens which represented himself for around 20,000 US dollars. He tokenized himself. So he promised By selling tokenized shares of himself through the Alex token, he promised investors a portion of any profits he makes in the next 3 years, up to $100,000. So basically, the investors are speculating that this guy is gonna maybe be successful and earn up to $100,000 and get a multiple on their initial investment. But he didn't stop there. So now not only did he tokenize himself, he also more or less sold his soul on a platform by allowing people to buy deep fakes of his voice. So as of yesterday, his entire likeness is available for sale, or at least for rent. Alepha AI, a new marketplace for synthetic media. Alepha's customers can dictate the words that come out of his digitally rendered mouth at a rate of $99 per 200 words. So I think the concept is very, very interesting, and it just shows that the creativity that is in the space. Many different concepts and projects are popping up that no one actually has thought of before, and I think it's very, very interesting that he actually pulled this off. So I give him credit to that, and I'm not sure if this is something that I would do, but I do think it's a very interesting concept. So let's continue with the last project that I want to share with you, and that is the visual code builder ETH.build. And this is very, very interesting project. It basically allows you to play around with many different like elements. You can click on them, you can drag and drop and interact with these different elements. You can create smart contracts. When you click on the 2 arrows, you've got a lot of different examples. You can either watch the video to get an understanding of the various examples. For example, you've got a hash function, you've got key pair, transactions, encryptions. And if you click on load, you can load these different, I would call it like small applications into the browser window. And you can look at how they work. So you can pull and drag all the different elements you can interact with. You can maybe put some text in. And as you can see, if I change this text here, maybe to another one, it will change the information. So let's go here. I put some text. It goes to the hash as an input. A string is generated, a key pair is used, and all that. So of course, I'm not going to go through all the options in detail, but I want to share with you this ETH.build because I think it's super exciting. I have to go through all the different projects and look through it for myself and try and understand how it all works. I might make a video on it in the future, I'm not sure. You can look and try and understand distributed ledger technology. You can look at transactions, look and see how a blockchain works. So you can click on load and this will load it into the browser. And I think this is an incredible piece of software that will allow you to understand how Ethereum works. So you can drag and drop these little boxes. You can also drag and drop these boxes and you can see this is actually a blockchain running in your browser with all the different elements. So you can understand how a blockchain works. So this is the first time I've seen a type of project like this, but I think this has a lot of potential. It might hopefully in the future enable people to start building applications on Ethereum without a lot of technical know-how. Like with Lego, many children can build different vehicles, they can build houses. Hopefully in the future, people will also be able to build their applications without the massive technical know-how behind it. Now, of course, with applications being easier to be made, there are some concerns in the area of security and so on, but if it's made in a way that it just can't break, then there is a lot of possibility behind such visual coding platforms. And yeah, I think this is going in a good direction. I'll link it down below so that you can experiment with the different applications. You can play around with it, have fun and see how it works, how Ethereum works behind the scenes. And yeah, with that said, this was today's video. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and I'll catch you in the next video. Have a good one. Bye bye.